welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Dawg Talk podcast. I'm your host, Reno, alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. Episode God knows what of this show. Honestly, stop counting. Need to go back and find the number. But we are excited to be here on a Thursday night, special Thursday night edition of the Dawg Talk. As I put on Twitter yesterday, moved the show to today because Georgia basketball was hosting a pretty major home game yesterday in terms of number 14 Florida. Rivalry matchup in Athens did not go the same way that matchup did last time out in Athens. Georgia fell 86 to 66 right here in Athens. Not the best of games. We'll talk about that here in a few short moments. But first, we will touch on hot topics. For those new to the show, that's Dan Kiley. I'm Reno. We appreciate y'all for being here. It's, I think, our fourth episode over here in the UGA Sports YouTube channel and social media channels. So we appreciate y'all for being here with us. Usually Wednesdays at 7:30 right here. You can find us alongside our favorite guy from K-Row, Koby Pyrz. He might be joining us tonight, a little bit delayed, had a schedule conflict pop up today, but we will keep you posted on that. Dan, let's talk about it. We got two hot topics, both, I'd say, rather hot and topical right now. As of, I believe it was today, you said you saw that GSHSA decided that they were going to allow athletes, high school athletes, to officially earn NIL opportunities here in the state, which means not only is there NIL in college ball and the rest of college sports, but now high school athletes, your local high school athletes, your favorite high school athletes can now earn money through name, image, and likeness. Thoughts on that revelation?
Well, all right. So let me start by saying this. It says GHSA allows student athletes to engage in name, image, and likeness activities provided that they are not associated with a school or a team, do not use the school logos, uniforms, facilities. NIL deals cannot be used as recruiting, as pay for play. Doesn't that sound awfully familiar to what we were given, about 5 or 6 years ago from the NCAA? Almost word for word, almost verbatim, what the NCAA told us NIL was. You could make name, image, likeness, couldn't use the school colors, school logos, all those types of things, and could not be pay for play. And it has turned into 100% pay for play. And this paves the way for schools that have the money in high school who are already getting all the best talent because they were buying them. We're now going to do it above board. I think it's an absolute joke and a shame. But at the same time, I don't understand why this ruling just came out, because we had Tyler Atkinson, who had a deal with, I believe it was Adidas, and had his picture up in Dick's Sporting Goods during the season in the Adidas section with him running up bleacher stairs in green and gold. So as far as I know, it already existed. Caleb Holt played basketball. I think that's his name. My son would know better than me, but he, I think it was Gatorade, gave him a lot of money. So I don't understand them coming out saying that it's legal, because they've been doing it anyway. I know that the school my son attended, that didn't happen, and then also the coaching staff weren't going to have it. So I really don't know what to say. I guess it was inevitable, Harrison. I mean, I think we both kind of agree that this was going to happen at some point. But man, you let the genie out of the bottle with NCAA, and we are in a world of hurt and a mess. And now we're just going to filter it down to the high school level. It does not sit well with me, Harrison. And maybe I'm too close to it. Just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what the enforcement on this will be. Like, what's the process here? Do we have to submit paperwork? Do you have to submit paperwork to the GHSA to get these NIL deals factored in? Like, I wonder what that process is going to look like. Obviously, with the NCAA, that's been the major issue, is the enforcement. There has been no enforcement arm that has been legally allowed to enforce its rules. So what does that look like at the high school level? I'm not sure. I'd have to dive in. That would be the one curious thing. don't have the utmost confidence in terms of enforcement at the local level, Dan, specifically in high school, really, because they really haven't enforced any transfer rules. Like, there's several instances over the years where you've had some skeptical movements to different high schools at certain programs where it wasn't much of a secret that maybe, hey, that was above board in terms of following the rule book. I'm really curious to see how this pans out. It also kind of opens up an avenue in terms of, the people who, view some of these prospects as people who are all in it for money. It certainly won't help in terms of tamping down some of those opinions. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Obviously, I'll also be curious to see what it looks like for athletes. Like, is this only going to be, hey, your top 1% of high school athletes are going to be able to get an NIL deal here in Georgia? Obviously, you mentioned Tyler Atkinson. Like, there's no surprise that already was able to happen because look at the name brand there. And it's crazy to be talking about name brand because he's an incoming freshman. But a 5-star athlete since pretty much, he broke onto the scene.
7th, 8th grade.
Yeah, like been around for a while. Julian Lewis would have been one of those guys. Like these prodigies of sorts, the ones that are identified way early on and go trending way too young, have name brand to them before they even reach the college level. I'm curious to see how it plays out, Dan, because it's going to make Friday nights really interesting in terms of what it looks like when player X has an NIL deal and what that looks like from a roster perspective, but also from a, do we see it bleed over into what they do on the field? Like, are we going to see maybe posters or billboards walking up on a school of X athlete with X, company? I'll be curious. I'm sure we've already seen it here in Athens and college towns with these NIL deals. Like, you journey a couple miles away from where I'm at, you can find a big poster board with Oscar Delp on it. And I wonder how much longer that's going to be up, obviously, because obviously he's now moving on to the NFL. But I wonder if we'll see that on the high school area here in the next few months. Dan, second question, second hot topic, which, again, this is really relevant considering the decision was made as of like 15 minutes before we went live. Trinidad Chambliss was granted his restraining, was it an injunction? I forget exactly what it was, the legal term. But he won his case that is going to allow him to play a 6th year of college football at Ole Miss after successfully arguing that he probably should have gotten a medical redshirt from the NCAA. From what I just read, it was basically he was able to convince this judge that it was a breach of contract, not an example of antitrust, and it's kind of a new legal avenue of sorts. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But with that in mind, Dan, if you are the NCAA or whatever organization down the road that becomes the one that can rule over college athletics and you are legally governing the sport, what would you make the eligibility rules for college sports at this point? Because it used to be 4 years of eligibility. I think 4 years and
5 to play 4.
Yeah, 5 to play 4. Now it's not even that. We don't know. It's just a case-by-case basis is your eligibility.
We've got guys now that have been in college football for 9 years. That's almost double what you were supposed to be. Here's the problem as I see it right now is that I don't know how you can give a blanket ruling on anything at this point because you've had so many exceptions and so many rulings go to the way of the players where these kids are hanging around. And, I know people get tired of hearing about it, but what it's really done is it's really bottled up the bottom of the rosters where these high school kids have nowhere to go. And, it used to be, I don't want to say it used to be easy because that's not right because you still had to be really, really good to get into a college. But the opportunities were a lot more plentiful back in the day when, like, I was coming out of high school, right? Like, a guy like me had opportunities to play at D1 schools. But you have, like, kids now who are way better than I was that are having to play D2 and D3 because there's no opportunities at D1 or even FCS schools because Their rosters are completely full with guys who've been there for 5, 6, 7 years. It's absolutely absurd. And then the other layer to that, Harrison, is that there is not a uniform policy. Like, for example, D3, I don't know if you know this, you are not allowed to redshirt. There is no such thing as redshirt. You have 4 years. So you don't have the 5 to play for. It's just 4 years, period. So you don't have 5th and 6th year seniors on D3 rosters. And then NAIA doesn't have any rules. Like, you can do whatever you want. You have 35-year-old men playing on a NAIA roster. That's not a joke. I know you're laughing, but it's not. I mean, you do have 30-something-year-old guys playing. You got guys who played college football back in the day, quit, didn't go to the NFL. They go back to NAIA schools when they're 40 years old. They're like, just for shits and giggles. There's no rules. It's like college football is an absolute flipping mess. It is a shit show. And there was a guy, and I wish I could remember what his name was, but he called in, or not called in, but he was a guest on 680 The Fan. And he was so articulate. He was so good. And he was just talking about the mess that they're in right now. And you're going to have to get to a point where you fall on the sword. And, like inevitably what he was talking about is you're going to have a union. And that is the one thing, like the college presidents agreed to this mess that we're in because they didn't want to agree that these people are employees. So until that happens, I mean, for me, I say you could play 4 years, and you got the 5 years, and maybe 6th with a medical hardship or something like that. But it has to be. Like, for me, it has to be an injury during the football season. It can't be like after the season you twisted your ankle and like, oh my gosh, you couldn't. I don't know. I mean, it's just what was didn't he argue that he had tonsillitis or something like that?
Yep.
And like, there's this one kid that I saw the article on. He's played 9 years. He tore the right ACL, tore left ACL, tore right ACL again, tore left ACL again. He tore both the ACLs twice. That's 4 years. And then he had like elbow surgery or something like that. But anyway, he's been like, this will be his 9th year and he's still playing. Like, at some point, bro, this is just not for you, And I know I've talked in circles, Harrison, but I really don't know what the rules should be. I know when I played, it was 5 to play 4, and that's pretty much what everybody stuck to. If you granted a kid a 6th year of eligibility, but he's only been on the field for like 1 or 2, I get it. Like, that makes sense to me. But then also, this needs to be uniform for any level of college football. It needs just to be, because that's the problem with these jumping from level to level, and they think that like their JUCO shouldn't count. It's like, bro, once you graduate high school, you have 6 years to play for or whatever. But it has gotten completely out of control and is nonsensical, and you have 28, 29-year-old guys playing college football that started at 18. That shouldn't happen.
I think I like the 5 and 4 rule. I think it makes sense. We have red shirts in place. We have medical red shirts in place. I think that doesn't need to change. I think what needs to change is there needs to be a formal way of appealing decisions. Because I think we can all agree some of the decisions that the NCAA makes and the way they go about it are unfair in terms of, hey, player X was able to do this and get away with this, but you come back to player Y and he can't do the same thing, even though there's similar cases. So I do think, I get it. The system is unfair. And it was the lawyer of the Charles, however you say his last name, the Alabama guy that just got ruled, ineligible, said the system is unfair. And he's like,
Tom Mars?
No, Darren Heitner, I think his name is.
Oh.
He said the system's unfair, but we're going to continue fighting for fairness. And there's a lot of irony in that statement, because his version of fighting for fairness is fighting for a former college athlete who forgoed his college eligibility to declare for the NFL or for the NBA draft. And then after kind of striking out and playing in the G League for, I think, 2 years, wants to come back and play in college basketball. That's fair? That's not fair. Not at all. That's just replacing one unfair way with another unfair way, was the point I had. But, Dan, I think the biggest change I'd have is there needs to be a form of arbitration that is separate from whatever governing organization there is. And they need to be able to dictate what eligibility rules are without it having to be decided in the court. We need to take courts and lawyers, we need to put them out of jobs in terms of college sports. They need to get the heck away, need to leave it alone. But first things first, there has to be some backbone. Whatever organization is going to run this place needs the authority to do it. Because the current rules, there are no rules. It's just we make it up as we go. We let some judge in Oxford, Mississippi, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who may or may not have degrees from those places, decide what is fair in college football these days. That's a major problem. We've talked about it a lot. Everybody's talked about it a lot. Dan, I say, to me, you stick with the rules you have in place right now in terms of 5 and 4 or 4 and 5. You get 4 seasons to play in 5 years. However you get there, whether it's redshirt, medical redshirt, whatever, we have those in place because I do think if somebody's out for an entire year with, some unfortunate injury, absolutely, they should get another chance. Their career should end there. But when we start getting the cases where we have 26, 27, 28-year-olds who, yes, they may have had 4 or 5 injuries, Dan, season-ending injuries, it's time to move on, buddy. It's time to move on because at that point, you're only holding up a spot from a kid who may potentially be able to play in the NFL. You're holding it away from him because, hey, you injured your ACL 4 or 5 times. But at this point, you're not even going to pass the NFL scouting combine's rigorous medical testing because you have 4 or 5 ACL injuries. Like there's no future here for you. It's time to move on. That's where I stand on this. And look, at the end of the day, the organization opened this can of worms up on themselves when they decided to open up a waiver process with the COVID years. If they had never done that, we could be in a world today where there isn't so much legality challenges against the eligibility rules. But since they decided to put a waiver in place, it opened them up to this. And once again, it's just dumb people running an organization that now that it's been taken out of control and the dumb people have lost, they've now realized, oh, we screwed up. And they're trying to fix it, and they're doing a poor job. They're not even a poor job. They don't have the control to fix what they've, sowed. So it's frustrating, Dan. It really is because it's.
And you can't drain the swamp either. Like you can't. Yeah. That's like in a perfect world, you'd be like, all right, listen, all these guys are done. Like you're immediately ineligible. Like we're done. All of you guys who've been here for more than 5 years, you're done. You're not playing this year, and open it up for all those roster spots. I mean, in a perfect world, that would happen, but that's never going to happen. So you still have this log jam on these rosters, and I don't know how you solve it because, I don't know.
When we reach like the end of the COVID super seniors, now we have these super seniors that are being given eligibility through new legal challenges, which it makes for an interesting case. Dan, let's switch gears.
I was going to say, did the Tennessee kid get approved?
Not yet. That case is still pending.
Yeah, well, he will now.
That was, and maybe we'll talk about that maybe next week because there was a really good thread kind of opening up on, hey, this is a new legal avenue that they successfully argued in this case that's going to open the avenue forward for other people to get eligibility. Because long story short, those attorneys were able to argue this isn't antitrust. This is a breach of contract by the NCAA in terms of the contract with the athletes in terms of how they determine eligibility. They argued it was an unfair process and no longer have to argue, hey, this is for the greater good of everybody else. It's just simply, this is about the greater good for myself. So we're going to see here over the next few months, unless something changes, how that plays out. But without further ado, damn. When I told you, hey, let's do a show on Thursday because I wanted to go cover the Florida game, I was thinking it was going to make for a good game because obviously I remember last year, what happened last time that team came into Athens. And in some areas, I think you were there for that. I forgot about that. In some ways, this team's better than last year's team. In other areas, last year's team is better than this team. But I thought obviously having Somto back, who got ejected in the first game pretty early on, that was going to make somewhat of a difference. Then we kind of found out, obviously, Jeremiah Wilkinson was not going to play, who's Georgia's leading scorer, and you're kind of like, ooh, it gets a little bit more difficult in terms of beating an already really good Florida team. Well, it went when we talked post game, you're like, well, what did you expect? And fair point. 86-66, 20-point loss at home. Georgia shot sub 40% from the field, sub 40% from beyond the 3-point line. Like the only way I could put it was everything that kind of could go wrong went wrong for Georgia. They were down. They started the game 6 of 28 from the field, and were down. I think it was as much as 20 points at that time in the first half, which it's a concerning trend. It's 3 games in a row now where they've been ice cold to start a game.
Well, listen, at the beginning of the season, the Dunkyard Dogs was really cool, right? To see him dunking on every shot. One of the things that I had talked to my friend who's very closely tied in with the Georgia program is this might be the worst shooting team I've ever seen in my life. Like in an era where shooting is at such an elite level across the board. I mean, you can go into any gym in America now and you can find a 5th and 6th grader who consistently can hit open threes, like consistently. And then as you get up into the high school range, you have high school kids that are hitting over 50% of their 3-point opportunities. And you say, okay, well, it's a different 3-point line. Not really, because most of those kids in high school now are shooting from at depth. They're not really shooting up on the line like we used to back in the day. You have guys that can absolutely just shoot the lights out. Georgia doesn't have anybody like Catchings.
Cannon Catchings is their best shooter.
It's supposed to be the best shooter. I mean, have we seen that kid make 7 or 8 threes in a game? No, like he's not even close. Blue Kane is supposed to be a good shooter. He's very streaky. Wilkinson shoots a lot of threes. He's just hit or miss. But it's not even just the three. Threes are obviously a big part of it because they shoot a shit ton of them and they don't make them. But even the 15-foot, the mid-range, they don't make those either. But they can dunk the piss out of the ball. And when they get into the lane, and they can throw alley-oops and do all that stuff, it is great. When they move the ball efficiently, when they share the ball, they don't do ISO stuff, and then they are really productive in transition, it's a really fun team to watch, and they're really, really good. But if you isolate them into a half-court offense, everything stalls out. And you get a lot of isolation, a lot of hesitation, and you start further away from the basket. Now, I coached basketball for a really long time at pretty high levels. They've done studies where if you start your offensive possession further than 30 feet from the basket, like the percentages of scoring on that are really low. And if you watch Georgia when they're doing their dribble handoff and passing, they're 4 or 5 feet behind the 3-point line at the top of the key. They're not in a position to attack. They're not up at the 3-point line ready to attack. Even when they kick and shoot, their shooters aren't ready to shoot. And and that's the other thing too is the drive and kick early in the game opens up a lot of offense for you. And a lot of times they're taking contested shots in the lane, they're not kicking. And then when they do kick, they're not making those shots. So they're not making them honor that. So they're able to crowd the paint, and then that eliminates the whole Dunkyard Dogs thing. And like I said, they're taking away transitions, slowing them down, making them play half court. And then Georgia does a really poor job of getting back. And you can talk about that because Coach White went off about that in his press conference about not getting back. You were there. You watched this game in particular up close and personal. Those are my thoughts from afar. You were there. You heard Mike White say it might be the worst team he's ever seen getting back. Go.
Yeah. And that was something for those who weren't able to watch the full thing, there were several possessions where Georgia had a made basket and Florida responds, which throughout the game, Florida just always seemingly had an answer. Every time Georgia got within 10 points, it was bang, 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 shot after shot. Florida's back up to like 15 points, back up to 15-point lead. But several times, I'd say at least 3 or 4 times, there were possessions, Dan, where Georgia hit a basket, Georgia made a basket, and Florida inbounds the ball within a couple seconds. Boom, they score. Just turn in what's usually off an inbound, Dan. Like usually it's, slow play a little bit, take your time, like we're not rushing. It's not supposed to look like a transition, not supposed to look like a fast break. But Florida was making those into a transition, into a transitional play, to a fast break, and they grabbed quick and easy answers. Whether it was a shot from beyond three or a quick dunk at the rim. There were several times. And that was Georgia's issue, is several times Georgia only had 2 or 3 players back. And immediately, right off Florida's inbound, you're in a fast break scenario. And side with the greater numbers is more likely to win in those cases. And Florida won because they shot over 50% from the field. Really hot shooting team last night. It was incredible. They looked like they were playing at home in terms of how they came out off the bus shooting. But beyond that, they also just had an easy time off the inbound. And that was the one thing to me. And you could tell when Mike White was asked about it, I mean, he was flabbergasted, frustrated beyond belief, because it was not a great night for his team on all accounts. Really poor night shooting, really poor defensively. The one positive is that he thought they rebounded the ball much better than he thought they would going into it, especially considering the fact Santos Surreal only had 2 rebounds that entire game. But Georgia had 9. Yep. Blue Cane was their leading rebounder with 11. Santos was really kind of taken out of the game plan, kind of in the paint. But the biggest thing that it, seemed to cause frustration from him was not enough of his guys were showing hustle and effort getting back on defense after a made basket. And he said that his team in this year had never shown that, and teams in the past, he hadn't really seen it. So I'm curious what that's going to look like in the next game. I'm sure that's going to be addressed heavily over these next few days, Dan. But I mean, I can tell you from this, and not to put anybody on blast, but there were 2 or 3 possessions in a row where Santos was on the offensive end selling an injury, which may or may not have been real, instead of getting back 2 straight possessions before he finally went back and got on defense. Yeah, and that's maybe he could get a pass because maybe he really did get hit and was selling a foul, but you can't have that in these games, especially versus a team that is shooting its lights out.
Sometimes there's things that can be quantified, and sometimes there's things that can't. And, like you kind of mentioned, like this team this year may be better than last year's team, but one of the guys on last year's team was Asa. And obviously it's a first-round pick, and you can, and all that goes along with that. But if you don't know who Asa is, what Asa is he is extremely, extremely active. His hustle is off the charts. He gets after loose balls. Look at how many offensive rebounds he gets. Look at how many defensive rebounds he gets while he was at Georgia. He never, while he was at Georgia, he wasn't scoring 30 or 40 points like a Cooper Flagg or somebody like that. But it was the silent stuff that he was doing that was allowed Georgia to win. But when you have a guy like that on your team who is the best player on the team, and he's also the guy who works harder than everybody else, then that, like, you can't slack off, because if your best player on the team hustles more than everybody else, the coach can get on your ass to hustle and to work for the second chance points and stuff like that, because your best player is already doing it and doesn't have to be told. If you don't have a guy like that on your team, then it's just not there. It's like hustle is one of those things you either do or you don't. And it's not one of those things you selectively do. It's like in your DNA. Like if you go to the YMCA and you play a pickup game of basketball, there's that one guy who annoys the shit out of everybody in the gym because he's flying 100 miles an hour everywhere and he's all up in your stuff, right? Well, that's who Asa is. He's all up in your stuff all the time. And when your best player's doing that, it's easier to get other players to do it. If you don't have that on your roster, it's hard. And I think of all the things that he brings to the table, that's the one thing that's missing from this Georgia team, is you don't have that guy that's just like up in everybody's stuff all the time. And he is not a vocal leader. He's not he's not the guy who's going to be like this, that, and the other, but he leads by example. And a guy like that who works hard like that gets respected. And you see him, like, he's on the Hawks roster and he's playing, he's getting minutes, and he's making the best out of his opportunities. But from the minute he stepped in the locker room, he was accepted and respected because he plays hard. He always plays hard. He may not be the best player on the floor in the NBA, but he's trying his ass off, and that's respected. And one of the first things I heard, one of the first guys that really accepted him in that locker room was Trae Young. And Trae Young doesn't have to like anybody. Now, granted, he's not here anymore, but like when you get respect like that, that's I think that goes a long way. And I think having watched a handful of these Georgia basketball games, I haven't watched every one of them, but I've watched a lot of them, and that's the one thing to me that's missing is that guy who's just 100% all the time. And like I said, it's hard to quantify that. Like there's not a number for that, and and it's just one person's opinion, and somebody else can have a different opinion and say something else. But I really feel like that's a big, big part of it. And then the other part of it is they can't shoot. So, I mean, you don't have guys who are busting their ass and you can't shoot to get you out of trouble. You were talking about the game last night where the lead just kept building and Florida had easy points, right? Well, Georgia couldn't do anything to chop back into that lead because they weren't making shots. And then what do distant shots missed most of the time are long rebounds, and long rebounds turn into runouts. To your point, easy baskets. So it's a disastrous situation, and I don't envy Mike White.
Even off made shots, they're getting.
Yeah, that's one thing. I hear you on that, but I'm saying when you're having to chuck up threes to get back into the game, and then you're giving up long, it's just like it's inevitable. Like if you're not making those shots, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And like I said, I don't envy Mike White because it's a bad situation to be in. And they did pay money for this roster. But we can get into that to another day if we want to. But they're just not ultimately they're not spending at the level that some of these other major programs are spending for basketball. And it's just a tough spot for Mike White. And I know he's going to get the finger pointed at him. And I don't think he's a bad coach. This roster wasn't well constructed. And that's a shame.
And as we kind of talked about last night, Dan, off camera, there is a truth here. Like, yeah, Georgia's not any closer to winning a national championship as it was maybe 10 years ago in basketball, but there has been improvements from where he took over. Like, he has them in a position now. Yeah, like he has them in a position now where they could make the tournament in 2 straight seasons for the first time since the early 2000s. That's something. And that's kind of to your point is there has been improvement, but for those in the fan base that, are not fans of it because Georgia's not competing for a national title and not winning a game like that last night, there's still a gap in terms of resources and roster construction they have yet to fill. And they may never fill. We'll see. It's a new era of college football. Heck, Indiana just won, or college basketball, college sports in general. Indiana just won college football down a national championship. So if Indiana can do it in football, I guess anybody can do it in basketball,
Let me add one little thing to what you said, then we'll move on. But you said Georgia is maybe not that much closer to winning a national title. I think it's a much different construction because, as little as 4 or 5 years ago, before Ant got to campus, like any team from about the 10 spot in the rankings on the way down to the bottom, right? From 10 to probably like 50. Georgia would probably lose that game, right? Well, now, anywhere from 10 to 50, Georgia on a given night could beat any one of those teams. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the teams that are 10 to 50. I'm saying that Georgia has the talent to compete with those rosters. I wouldn't go as far as to say those top 10 teams, the Georgia – I mean, of course, any given night, anybody can win. I get that part of it. But I'm talking about overly consistently – I wouldn't bet money on Georgia against any one of those teams, right? Like Duke, they're not beating Duke unless Duke just shits the bed. But they're not beating them. They're not beating North Carolina. They're not beating.
They're not staying within,
Yeah, they're not beating Michigan. Michigan's going to drag them. Those teams like that. Like they're not beating those teams. But the program has been elevated to where those teams like UCLA and stuff like that. You can compete with those teams right now. It's so there has been progress. And I don't think either one of us is saying that there hasn't been progress, but
I just threw up the schedule kind of out of your point. Like you obviously look at the ranked win over Arkansas. I'm not sure if they're still ranked. I assume they are, but they are competing in a lot of these games. Like that Tennessee loss still stings you. I mean, that would have been a huge
Look at the Ole
win
Miss
for them.
loss. They were
Yeah, the
winning
Ole
that
Miss
game by
loss as
20,
well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I remember watching that game.
It's been, you've had some close losses here that have stung you. Obviously, the Tennessee game kind of reminded you of the Auburn game earlier in the year where you won that game in overtime. God, that game was incredible. But yeah, I mean, there's been a couple games this year where they should have won. I mean, even the Clemson game earlier in the year, they probably should have won that game. But in terms, before we wrap up, Dan, and move on to our position preview, I wanted to, people always ask, hey, so what does it look like for Georgia in terms of the tournament this year? Well, you're 5-6 at SEC play, which I think this is the most important thing to look at when we talk about what Georgia is going to do in the tournament, where they're going to be. I believe Joe Lunardi had them firmly in the field heading into this week. I think they were, I have to go check the seed to see exactly where they were, but they were not on the bubble. They were in the field. In terms of what this does for them with a loss, they still have a lot of basketball ahead of them. I believe it's 7 games. They have 7 games left to go, and they're still firmly in a path to make the tournament. Here's the deal. At 5-6, you have to win 4 of your next 9 games or 7 games. So you have to get to 9-9 in conference play. You have to be 500 in conference play. And from what it seems like, Georgia will be in if that's the case. Dan, when we kind of look at this schedule, there are there are a good bit of winnable games here. Like, I don't think Oklahoma is a unwinnable game. You can win that game. Hardest part about that's obviously going to be going on the road. They have a rest break. I think the Texas game, they should win this game at home. I think they should have played much better on the road. They were playing much better and kind of slacked off the second half and lost that game. I expect them to win that game. Vanderbilt, kind of to your point you were just making, they should be able to play with Vanderbilt. Heck, I think they could beat Vanderbilt, although Vanderbilt's been a good team this year. South Carolina and Mississippi State, these are must-wins. These are not great basketball teams this year. These are must-wins in my book. The ones that are kind of up in the air, or I would lean towards, them losing at Kentucky early in the season. If you would have asked me, could Georgia beat Kentucky? I would have said absolutely. As of late, Kentucky's kind of been getting hot, trending in the right direction again. That's going to be a game. And then Alabama, that's obviously Charles not being there. That's going to make things interesting, but Alabama's still a good basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some work to do.
Yeah, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, of those 7 games, if we're saying 3 of them, at least 3 of them are coin flip or worse, that says something about what the program's at right now. With that 7-game stretch, if at least 3 are coin flips, you're in a solid position because you only have to win 4 games to be in the field. So that's just kind of our take on it. We've been wanting to talk basketball for a little bit now, especially with how the season kind of started for them. It just hadn't lined up last week. Obviously, the snow game pushed them back. So they played Tennessee on Wednesday night, obviously the same time that we do our show. But since the schedule was close enough this week, we can move some things around. It worked out. We can talk to them tonight. Dan, with the way the schedule works out for us again, we will be able to talk about them on next Wednesday's show after the road game trips to Oklahoma and Kentucky. But back to the gridiron. I know it's the offseason. Everyone always wonders, what the hell are we going to talk about, in mid-February with football? Well, we're going to start a new series leading up to spring practice position previews. And we're starting with, I'd say, obviously it's always, quarterback's always going to be the best conversation in terms, that's what people want to talk about. Hey, how's quarterback? Hey, what's quarterback look like? What's the expectations? But right now it's a pretty straightforward conversation in terms of preview for Georgia's room, because you have your starting quarterback returning. It was this time last year where everyone was under the assumption Gunnar Stockton's going to be the quarterback, even though it's an open competition right now. But that's no longer the case. Earlier this week, Pete Nikos reported he officially signed his contract to return as Georgia's starting quarterback in 2026. I know having that come out in the middle of February after the portal closed probably raised some eyebrows. Like, yeah, where was this 5 weeks ago? But that's the point in all this, Dan. As he kind of pointed out in that article, Gunnar was waiting to officially sign until after the portal to, help his team improve through the portal and get as much talent as possible, and then get Heel's deal worked out. I saw Arch Manning draw a lot of plaudits for doing this at Texas back in like December, January. You don't see it brought up now with Gunnar Stockton because he just did the same exact damn thing, and only a few people are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you have a quarterback who's talented, and obviously Georgia wants him back, but he's not Arch Manning.
Yeah,
he's not one of the quarterbacks where everybody in the nation wants him. Like Gunner's a very good quarterback, and he would do very well on a lot of different rosters, but he's not for everybody. But he's ours, and our guys feed off of him. But the redeeming quality he has is that he cares more about the team than he cares about his NIL bank account. And to your point, by not signing this deal, allowed Georgia to use the money that they had to get everything they could possibly get. And he kind of took what was left over. It's not, I'm like, nobody go home and cry for Gunnar Stockton. He's doing just fine. But he's not getting $3 or $4 million to play a season. But that's not what he cares about. He wants the roster to be good around him, which is really friggin' smart if you're a quarterback. Like if your roster's loaded, guess what? Your job gets a lot easier. Like people always will come at me about, oh, you think Stetson Bennett was good? Well, look at all the talent he had around him. I'm like, yeah, there's no quarterback in America that would have been like, no, I don't want to be on that team. It's too talented. No, I mean, yeah, that's the whole friggin' idea is to make sure that my roster is better than yours. He buys into it. And then I think we could even take it a step farther, the entire quarterback room, right? None of those guys are standing there with a hand out. Like, it's just they're glad they want to be here. They're here for the right reasons. They're all getting money. Like, nobody's not being able to eat on a Saturday night downtown Athens. I promise you they're taken care of. But I think that's and we're listening to the radio today and they were talking about how Georgia might have one of the cheapest quarterback rooms in the entire nation, right? But then I would take it a step further and say, but Georgia probably has one of the most stable quarterback rooms in the country. I'm not going to say we have the most talent top to bottom, but we have one of the most stable rooms in the country, and we're not paying through our teeth to do it. I think that's very valuable, extremely valuable. Obviously, we all know in football, every player, doesn't matter what position, is one play away from not playing. So to have depth in that room that you can be confident in is extremely important, but then even more so, not having to pay through the nose to keep those guys on campus is really important. And Georgia was able to do that. So I have more thoughts on the quarterback room, but go ahead, Harrison. What are your overall takeaways?
I wanted to add to that. I brought this up because I didn't want to distract you when you're in the middle of your glorious rant right
Thank
there.
you for not doing that.
But yeah, I know I sometimes get you, but I always do it to try to add to what you said. But I waited. This was a quote from Gunnar Stockton's agent. I'm not going to try to say his name because I will butcher both of his first and last name. So I won't do it. But shout out to him. Pete Nakos put this out earlier in the week. And I quote, he said, he did not feel an announcement was necessary as he is a player who would never consider transferring. Here is the part that is basically what Dan just told you, but it just echoes it loudly. He could have earned 2 to 3 times more by entering the portal, but Gunnar bleeds red and black. And he goes on to say he wanted Georgia to have the budget to retain and acquire the talent needed to compete for another championship. Gunnar doesn't play football at UGA for money. Leading that team is his lifelong dream. That's all Kirby Smart wants from every single player. And he said as much before that if he could have 1 through 100, 105 of Gunnar Stockton's, he would take them because he wants people that aren't there to make the check, aren't there to go in there, make their money and get out. He wants people there that are there for the development and for the love of the university. And that's what Gunnar Stockton is. We've talked about it on this show, Dan, because I know you've brought it up. I know Kobe's brought it up. Even on the PSA Power, good friend, Eddie from Ackworth has brought it up. the team has taken on the attitude of its quarterback. And you saw that over the last 2 years in good ways and in bad ways. Last year, well, year before 2024, there were some things about that team that it took on from its quarterback in terms of good and bad. And there were some questions. Like, there was a reason there was fire, passion, and energy in terms of the mantra going into this past season for Georgia, because that was something that lacked from the team before. Then you come into this season and they have that across the board, but Gunner playing how Gunner does, you see that team rally around him and play at that level because of how he plays. So, Dan, I think it's a really important example, obviously set here, that, and I think people just take this for granted. I think a lot of people just look at these top quarterbacks and assume that they're going to come out here and say the right things and do the right things and take less money. But we both know there's some hard truths here. Not every quarterback in America is doing this. Not every program has the means of convincing a guy to do this. And people will probably, some non-Georgia fans will look at this and say, "Oh, that's BS." Like, I'm sure he's getting paid a lot. And yes, he is making good money. Like you said, he is able to go out and eat on Saturday night in Athens. But he's certainly, I think it's true, he could have made much more money on the market elsewhere if he wanted to.
Yeah, and that, to your point, not every quarterback's the same, right? To be a leader of a team, you have to have a little bit of moxie to you, right? You have to be really confident. But also there's a way to be genuine and be a good person. And having spent this last year going to all these camps and being around all these different quarterbacks, and there are guys that you are drawn to, and there's guys that you wouldn't want anywhere near your football team. And it's so, like, in a very short period of time, you can kind of catch on to that, right? Like when the guys separate and they're warming up, they're talking or whatever. Like, you have guys who are really talented, like they're talented, but they're kind of jerks. And I don't know why you would want that on your roster. Now, I've been around Gunner when he was in high school. He is extremely confident. I mean, you could even say a little bit cocky, but he was genuine and people were drawn to him. And like, it's that, again, going back to what we were talking about with basketball, there's certain things you can quantify and certain things you can't. And people have this magnetism where, you always see it in the movies where the quarterback steps in the huddle and he says something inspiring, and these guys, yeah, that's corny and those are for movies, but there's also a lot of truth to that where these guys will do anything for that guy because they know he'll do anything for them, and he's got their best interest in mind. Our comment there about making sure his O-line is fed. Well, we saw that back with JT. JT got that, was it Zaxby's money? I don't remember where it was.
I think it was the Zaxby's deal.
But he didn't keep any of that money for himself. He split up all that money and gave it to his offensive line. Now, people have their opinions about JT, the football player, but as a human being, that's a smart guy. I mean, he's taking care of the guys that take care of him. Like you see these quarterbacks in the NFL buying their offensive linemen gifts, taking them out to eat, inviting them over to their house, spending time with them. All of that stuff is extremely important. And I know we've kind of, this whole thing is taking on a life of its own here, Harrison. But I think the point we're trying to make is that you can probably point to some guys in the country that are more talented, right? Where, Arch Manning is, touched by the hands of Jesus, or, all whatever. But Georgia has a guy that they really need. But then behind that, they have two other guys who are fitting right in, and they're going along the same path. And while he might not be as talented as some of the other guys leading programs, I'm very thankful that he's here. And I'm surprised I'm saying that because when he first got here at Georgia, I didn't know how it was going to play out. I didn't know if he was going to be the guy who kind of got lost in the shuffle and passed by, because there were some questions whether he could play at this level. But he's proved a lot of people wrong. His grit, his desire, his passion, all the things that he plays with have made him very endearing. And, even when he doesn't have the best game in the world, there is not a level of criticism levied towards him that there are to some of the guys that have played for Georgia in the past. And part of the reason is because people love him and his teammates love him and they rally to him. And when everybody in the building has got his back, it's really hard to shoot arrows because he's got a brick wall built in front of him and you can't get to him because he does all the right things. He says all the right things. He's about it. He goes about it the right way. I mean, the football is the football part, but the personality is a major piece to the puzzle, and he's nailed the shit out of that part.
And he doesn't say much.
No, he didn't have to.
He might say a lot of, he might say a lot of words, but he ain't really saying anything. I know we've talked about it before on this show. He is, I think you've said it before, he's the coach's dream in terms of how he deals with the media. Doesn't give
you know who else didn't say a lot when he played? And I'm not comparing the two. Michael Jordan didn't say a lot when he played. He let other people do the talking for him. Have you ever heard Michael Jordan say I'm the best player of all time? He's never said it. Never come out of his mouth. Everybody else says it.
I need to go. I guess I need to go back and see if I could find like some Michael Jordan interview post game. See what that's like because
he talks a lot now, but he didn't.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like back then, like post games back then, what he was like back then. You're talking about the guys after him, after Gunner, and I think an important point is, let's talk about you've touched on it when we kind of introduced this segment. Is hey, Georgia may not have the top to bottom most talented quarterback room. Like there are other quarterback rooms out there that is 5-star after 5-star after 5-star with, touched by Jesus quarterback prospects. But Georgia has a really stable room to your point. And it's because of the way they've gone about it. And you look at Oregon, Dan Lanning hasn't had a quarterback start for him that's been recruited by him out of high school. It's been a portal guy. He's gone to the portal in pretty much every year he's been there, I believe. Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore, and now Dylan Raiola is going to be the next guy up. Texas Tech, 2 straight years, 2 straight transfer quarterbacks. Well, Baron Morton wasn't, but maybe he was. Signetti over at Indiana, going to have 2 straight transfer quarterbacks. Like, Georgia's not. Georgia started a transfer quarterback with JT Daniels. Stetson Bennett, they recruited out of high school, who transferred away to a JUCO, but then came back to the program. But I don't technically quantify him as a transfer quarterback of sorts, your normal, typical transfer quarterback. Other than that, Jamie Newman obviously never played at Georgia. Everybody else, for the most part, has been recruited out of high school. And every single guy on Georgia's roster has now been recruited out of high school. And, you talked about wondering what the deal was going to be with Gunnar Stockton coming out of high school. Let's look at a guy like Ryan Puglisi, who has been here for now, I believe, 2 years. 2 years now, going into his, I think, redshirt sophomore season. And he decided to come back. He told our own Anthony Dasher at the Sugar Bowl, I don't care about what's going on with the other schools, like whether or not they're hitting me up. I want to be here. This is where I want to be. Emphatically stated he was returning. But there's no path to playing time for him this year. Like, his earliest path to playing time is going to be in 27. And you look at the guys behind him. Bryson Beaver, obviously a guy that just who was originally signed with Oregon, got released from it after the Raiola news, ends up at Georgia, straight out of high school. Hexiah Malinder, they signed last year, last recruiting class, 3-star from Clark Central. Like, those guys are all here. Those guys are all competing without a path to playing time until 2027 at the earliest.
Yeah, like in today's market with these quarterbacks and stuff, it's going to be harder and harder to get those top-line guys, and I think it's going to be more important than ever to make sure you got the right guy, right? Like, obviously having Jared Curtis would have been cool because he's really, really talented, but if he doesn't want to be here and he wants to play for money, I'm not going to be the guy who's like, oh, he was to be terrible anyway. I'm not saying that. The guy's freaking good. But like, it's that fine line, right? Like, if it's really, you can't compare Georgia and Vanderbilt's roster. You can't compare Georgia and Vanderbilt. facilities. You can't compare Georgia and Vanderbilt's success, their track record.
Can't compare the quarterback room.
There's nothing you can compare. Their rosters, there's not Georgia is vastly superior in every line item. Check, Georgia. The pros and cons, right? Georgia wins every single column, except for Vanderbilt pay more money, and that's where he went. So those types of kids they're just going to go where they're going to go, and you're going to have to live with that. There's nothing more that Kirby or anybody could have done. It wasn't about facilities, wasn't about quality of coaching, wasn't about the rosters. It was all about money. So when you have situations like that, you just got to kind of roll with it. And just be thankful that we're getting really talented guys that want to come here and play here. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me in this quarterback room is that you have guys who are very talented that want to be here. And they're showing that by staying here. And more so, they're showing it by staying here, and they're not asking for top dollar. It's not – the guys on the roster in that spot are not here because we paid them more than anybody else. So – I think the quarterback's in a good spot. Now, from the football perspective side of it, Gunner has some things to work on in the offseason. Obviously, he's got to trust himself a little bit more. Probably needs to risk the ball a little bit more. I love the fact that he didn't turn it over a ton, but at the same time, there's some shots that I wish he would take and just live with the results. But I think that's going to come too because he's more experienced. But then as far as Pug and Montgomery go, Pug was in a situation to be able to fill in if he had to this year. I know one of the things that first came out was how talented his arm talent is. And then also as the year went on, people have said that it started to click with him and he started to pick up the playbook and understand what they were doing really, really well. So I think he's in a good spot. Now, Montgomery, we know far less about Montgomery than we do about Pug, but you have to think now that he's had, is it 2 years in the program already? Is that right?
Montgomery's through his first one. First full year.
Well, yeah. And then, but he was also sidelined by some injuries. So the playbook part of it, he should be pretty confident in now. And now it's just putting everything together. And then those two guys should have a really good battle for that number 2 spot. I think Pug would probably get the nod at this moment, but you never really know. And I think the talent is there where if, God forbid, something should happen to Gunner, I don't think all hope is lost by either one of those guys having to come in and play. And that's why I said I think it's probably one of the more stable rooms in the country where obviously – your number 1 is the number 1 for a reason, but if you had to go to your number 2, I don't think it's that much of a step back or step off. I think it's probably you're going to most likely run the offense a little bit different. Probably not as quarterback run heavy, but I think it's there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about that room.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think when you look at the future beyond just this season too. Georgia's going to have a bevy of guys who are in their second and third year in the program, second and third year in the offense at that point, competing for the starting job after Gunner. Whereas, just flashback a year ago, you had Gunner who 3 years in the program, I think almost 4, competing against a guy who was in his second year in the program. Second year of the offense. That's a vast difference in terms of having 2 or 3 guys with 2 or 3 years of experience or more. Competing for the starting job next time it's open. So, Dan, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I know we've talked about it kind of at length across both platforms about the quarterback and our thoughts on the quarterback. Gunner surpassed my expectations. While at the same time, there were some moments in there where it's like, man, you wish it was a little bit more linear in terms of improvement. There were moments in there where you're like, man, you really have to take a next step in that certain area. You look back at the Ole Miss game late in the year, there's some throws in there, some decisions in there where you're like, man, that's a throw that needs to be made or a decision that needs to be made. And it leaves you wondering, okay, what is next year going to look like? He improved as the year went on first 4 games to his last 4 games, there's a vast difference, even though his last 4 games aren't that wholly impressive. Like the Georgia Tech game was kind of kind of meh. Didn't really have to do much in that game. Alabama played well, but again, didn't really have to do much in that game either. They still won. So I'm curious to see what it looks like. We saw a jump from year 1 as a starter to year 2 with Stetson Bennett, not counting 2020 as year 1. I'm talking 21 as year 1. We saw a jump there. What does it look like for Gunnar Stockton? My bet is, considering what we saw over the course of last season, it's a pretty sizable jump and one that fans can be excited about. The lone part of this that makes you potentially derail it is if the guys around him take a step back and aren't improved and don't improve. That's the only thing. That's the question. And we'll talk more about that in our position previews to come over here on the Top Dog Talk podcast. That's Dan Kiley. I'm Harris Reno. We'll see you next week.
Go Dogs.